Hello, welcome to my channel, Jeem. This is, of course, your host, Jeem. And please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to this video. Today we're going to be doing kind of an expansion of a refutation I made the other day regarding Dr. Ali Atay and Paul Williams of blogging theology infamy. In their video, Dr. Atay essentially posited the theory that the New Testament was created on Platonic metaphysics. Most definitely, he asserts, the Gospel of John. Now, we're going to refute some of that material. I'm not going to be doing a line-by-line refutation. This isn't a normal live stream, so off the top of my head, what has been discussed in that video will be debunked. So the first assertion he makes, or one of the most important ones, is on the basis of Trinitarianism or Binitarianism, however he wants to cite it in the New Testament. He basically says the New Testament does not teach what he calls Trinitarian monotheism. It does not teach Unitarianism. It does not teach Tawhid. It across the board teaches, he doesn't say the words, but it essentially is Arianism or semi-Arianism. And so his critique is that Arianism, or semi-Arianism, is inherently a Platonic idea of theology. Now, the issue with this is that he essentially scapegoats Plato's theology in much the same way I sometimes do, although my critiques are far more accurate, as a directive against the New Testament. But the problem with that is that he then makes it so that Trinitarian monotheism is actually acceptable. So then why would he counter it as an Islamic theologian / philosopher? What would be wrong with the Trinity if it's Arianism or semi-Arianism that is really the Platonic idea? He does go on to say that the Trinity comes from Neoplatonism, but then he says actually Trinitarian monotheism is not found in the New Testament. So they took it from Neoplatonism, but they forgot to put it in the New Testament. Interesting. So the main theory, as I said, is the Platonic metaphysics. He asserts that you have this one ineffable, perfect being who's beyond all things, absolutely perfect, the unseen one. That's, of course, in his scheme, that's going to be related to the Father. And he says, citing John 1:18, that the Son explains the Father. No one's seen God, the God, hatheos, at any time, but it's the Son who has exegeted him. So that means explained him. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that nobody can ever see the Father. It just means nobody had seen him. The Son is the one who comes in the name of the Father. Now, he asserts that this by itself is a Platonic idea because the deuterotheos, the second God in the Platonic scheme, or in Philo's scheme, what he calls Philonic theology, is the one who interprets and shows up as the placeholder for the true God. So this lesser God, the demigod, the deuterotheos, is the one who shows up in place of the true God. My issue with this is that this concept is actually found in what he calls Tanakhi Judaism. So the Judaism of the Pentateuch does have this concept. So we can't say that the idea of a lesser or secondary divinity coming in the name of this primary originator is a Hellenic idea. Just because Philo was a Hellenized Jew doesn't mean everything he taught came only from Hellenism. There's probably 40% of what he taught actually came from real, authentic Judaism of its time. So it's kind of fallacious to say, oh, this guy was Hellenized, so every word that comes out of his mouth has to be a Hellenic trick. That's not true. So the idea of a being or an entity or a hypostasis, a concrete existence coming in the name of the true God, the person that we're referring to as the true God, meaning the Father, that's found in the Old Testament. If you read St. Athanasius and St. Hilary of Poitiers, their interpretation of Genesis 18 and 19 is that it is the Son who, even though it's not called the Son, it's not called the angel of Jehovah or anything, it's just called the Lord. So that's the divine name, and the Latinized version would be Jehovah, shows up to Abraham. I'll give anybody $2,000 USD if they can find an example of there being the words, there are three angels, or the two angels plus a third angel called the angel of the Lord in those chapters. It's not there. So he's only called the Lord, but all the church fathers agree that wasn't the Father. So how can this be? Well, in the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, Tanakhi Judaism, as Dr. Atay will call it, you do have the concept of an angel who comes in the name of the Father. It's there in Exodus. God says, I'm sending my angel before you to show you the way. My name is in him. He will not forgive your sins. So he can be called the same name that the Father has. The Tetragrammaton, the Jehovah. Likewise, in the book of Acts, it's made clear that the one in the burning bush was an angel. Yet the one in the burning bush says, I am that I am. I am the Lord Almighty. So in the Old Testament, you have the concept of a different person, a different concrete entity, a different concrete existence, not entity. The secondary person, the deuterotheos, as he's saying, predates this idea of Philo and predates all the Hellenism because it's already there. So we already have this concept that you can come in the name of the Almighty Father. And you can even use the Father's name, Jehovah, of course, applied to the Son. And you don't have to say this is the Son. You can just say that's Jehovah. Because he's speaking as the representative. That's what it means. That's why in Hebrews 1:3 it calls Christ the exact expression of God the Father. It doesn't say he is a carbon copy, that we don't have two fathers. It means he's the exact expression. So the Father is not the Son is not the Father, neither of them are the Holy Spirit. So they can't be carbon copies because then we just have three fathers. We don't have three fathers. But it says the exact expression, the exact representation. That's why when Philip asks him, show us the Father, Christ says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. It doesn't mean he is the Father. It doesn't mean that's his facial features are what the Father looks like. It just means he is the one who bears the name of the Father and comes in the name of the Father. That's what it means. So as I've demonstrated, that is replete in the Old Testament. This is not going to be a highly edited video, so not going to be showing slides and stuff here. You guys should know this stuff anyway. Another one of his points on the Platonic metaphysic unit is he mentions in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word or the Logos, and the Logos was with the God, okay, and the Logos was Theos. So the Logos wasn't ha Theos, the Logos was Theos. He makes a big deal out of this and says, see, that means he's a deuterotheos. He's a secondary God. He's like a different God. But we're doing a bit of a word concept fallacy here because the word God in English stems from theos in the Greek, but that itself in the Bible stems from Elohim. And Elohim in the Hebrew, or Elaha in Aramaic, does not always mean the God. It can mean a divine thing. So Moses, many of the rabbis or judges of Israel, they're called Elohim. So it doesn't mean Moses turns into a celestial being, and the judges of Israel don't go into some divine pantheon from Mount Olympus. That word doesn't always mean God, the way that you think it means. So that's exactly the word concept fallacy, or the fallacious nature through which that word is used, used in Dr. Atte's presentation. And another example of this is that false gods who are made of stone idols, are called Elohim in Genesis. With Rachel, Laban, that whole episode when they're fleeing from Laban, the false gods are called Elohim. So it's a word concept fallacy. But anyway, the idea that you have whole Theos, the Father, and just Theos, the divine one, the Son, is perfectly in the lines of monarchy in the first place. Like George Florovsky, Father Thomas Hopko, St. Athanasius, St. Hilary of Poitiers, they would all agree with the idea that you have the God is usually referred to as the Father, and then you have the Son who is in the name of the Father. So it's actually okay if John uses that language because that is what is being taught. Again, if it's the Arianism that is Platonic, what's the problem with Trinitarianism? Why don't you just do Trinitarianism instead? He then says, Paul quotes a pagan philosopher, therefore you have Plato's philosophy has entered into the New Testament, but it's actually not Platonic philosophy. It's a hymn to an old Greek god that is supposedly mentioned. And the important thing here that Dr. Atte and Paul Williams and all these guys miss is that Platonic paganism is not the same as Olympian polytheism. The Olympians believe that the gods actually interacted in time and space in a geographical area. Whereas with Plato, he believes in like a perfect, ineffable God who's everywhere and surrounds all things, omnipresent, omnipowerful. So that's a massive difference. You can't just say, oh, they're both pagan, therefore these two pagan ideas are the exact same. If Paul quotes a pagan, that's Platonism. It's not. It's actually the exact opposite. And Paul only quotes those to relate to the Greeks he's talking to. He never accepts their metaphysical categories. So that would definitely be a massive difference between this idea of Platonism and this idea of like austere Olympian paganism. Neither of which are actually really found in the Bible at all. So I find it interesting that he would bring that up when that's an incorrect critique of the position, it's kind of irrelevant. And moreover, if there was Platonic metaphysics in the Gospel of John, then Jesus would ascend in all directions all at once, because God is omnipresent as a sphere surrounding creation in Plato's theme, but no, he just goes upward directly, geographically to heaven. So I think that there isn't any of this Platonism stuff in the New Testament. Some of the church fathers do utilize it as a way to bridge the wisdom of the Hellenics or the Hellenistic peoples and what happens in the Bible. But it doesn't seem to be that there is any actually found in the New Testament itself. So to Dr. Attai, Paul Williams, and other people making these critiques, you guys have not read the philosophy, or you have, and you're creating a straw man of the New Testament that's not there. Because some church fathers, including people like he mentioned Origen's not a saint. So everybody admits that Origen did Neoplatonic Arianism, as did Arius. So again, the Trinity was seen as a solution to that Neoplatonism. But there isn't any actual Neoplatonism or Platonism found in the New Testament itself. Rather, the church fathers find a way to accommodate both ideas. All right, thank you guys very much for listening.